Hi guys, and welcome to the Women's Health Summit, where you're gaining clarity so you can lead with confidence and finally turn that passion into profit. I'm Laura Sherrill, a high-performance women's health coach and the founder of Balance Bombshells, and today I'm here with Dr. Ashurina Ream, who is a licensed clinical psychologist with advanced training in prenatal mental health. She got into this when she became a mother, and I'm just so excited because she has been able to take her passion and create a community where she helps women from before getting pregnant, during pregnancy, and postpartum, which is so needed in our world. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I feel like we have so much to talk about. So first, let's get started with how you got into your work and why.
Okay, so if you would have asked me, 5 years ago, and I know a lot of people say this, if I would have seen myself doing this, I would have said absolutely not. It all started, I had a lot of fertility issues myself. So I grappled with miscarriages, and I never imagined myself. I don't think anybody imagines themselves going through that. So my fertility journey was really difficult. And I thought that the minute I would get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy, I would just be joyful, and I would never experience postpartum anxiety, or why would I ever be depressed postpartum? I wanted this kid more than anything. And when it didn't happen that way, and I started to feel all these emotions, I was so interested in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders that I felt like there was no turning back at that point. I wanted to know about it, and I wanted to help every single person that I could encounter that was going through this, because I know I felt so alone, and I really wanted to help moms to not feel alone. So that's been my passion for the last several years, and it's interesting how it's all unfolding.
And I feel like we should touch on the glory of this story is that you have a 3-year-old son.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think women should know that, especially when they're like, oh, she was dealing with miscarriages and infertility, but you have a 3-year-old son. I really do believe that our experiences in life end up guiding us into the work that we're so passionate about. So do you think that your work and the experiences that you had make you more empathetic for the women that you work with?
Yes, definitely. And that's the reason why I feel like with any other fields I've ever pursued or I've worked in, I've enjoyed them, but there's something different about something that's so personal. And for me, when I sit with my clients and I can remember and I can feel their pain and I can empathize with them. And when I tell them, I see where you are and I feel the pain, it's not the same. I know my experience is much different than everybody else's, but there's something to be said about the personal experience piece. And so in the midst of my struggle with fertility issues, it was something I did in silence. I didn't want anybody to know about it. I didn't want to talk about it.
Which happens all the time.
Yes. I was just this is the last thing I want to talk about. People keep asking me, I'm going to put on a brave face and I'm just going to, continue on. And when I realized that we need to be talking about this, I want to be the voice for people that maybe they are suffering with this, any of it, in silence.
And I was reading a blog you have about miscarriage and loss, and it was basically about the myths. And I think you kind of just touched on some of them. We need to be talking about it because women feel like we can't. Even your struggle with talking to your doctors, I thought was so powerful because that's what led me into women's health was I couldn't get the answers. They were disregarding my emotions. I used to have PMDD. So they were just you're healthy, you're fine, go home. And I was like, no, my body is literally plummeting and I'm not who I know I'm supposed to be for a few days before my period. This is really off. And they're just no solutions, just send you home. So I was like, all right, I'm going to figure it out. But I couldn't talk about it because none of my friends experienced it. Nobody truly understood. So I just love that you touch on the mental health piece because I feel like women are really struggling and they don't know what's normal, what's not normal. What are some things that usually come up with the women that you work with in terms of their emotions that we can kind of just understand a little bit in case they've ever happened within ourselves?
There is so much that people don't know about that I feel like I could spend years talking, but not years, but I don't think that a lot of women that are experiencing struggles throughout their fertility journey, I don't think they realize how much anxiety can come up, how much the depressive symptoms can come up, even trauma, because they can truly experience trauma. It is a very traumatic experience to live through that journey. And trauma is in the eye of the beholder. So whatever we feel like was traumatic for us is indeed traumatic. And anything through that perinatal period we talk about is throughout pregnancy and that first year postpartum. A lot of women don't even recognize that their symptoms actually started throughout pregnancy. And I was a very anxious pregnant person because I did struggle with fertility issues. So the whole time I was paranoid and I was stressed, and I would go to my next appointment worried that I was going to get bad news, or I was worried that it was just doomed, because I felt like that was my history. That's how everything had been unfolding up until that point. So I was just always waiting for bad news. And I remember being so anxious as I was in the delivery room, and I'm like, I just want to hear my son cry. I just need to hear that boy scream so I can, relax a little. So anxiety throughout pregnancy is something that moms don't know about. And even I used to have these, what we call intrusive thoughts or scary thoughts. You can have them throughout pregnancy and postpartum, where you have these fears about something happening to you or your baby. And I remember I would have these fears about dropping my son up and down the stairs. So I didn't know this, but over 90% of new parents have intrusive thoughts. There's just a lot of things surrounding anxiety, the depressive symptoms that can come up, and that we don't talk about, like anger, but a lot of it causes shame and guilt. So it's just easier to ignore it, avoid it, and say like, there's something wrong with me, but whatever, I'll get through it, instead of talking about it.
I think that women, like as women, we're basically conditioned to, or maybe just the human condition, everybody, we're conditioned to like get away from what's uncomfortable. So we just like sweep it under the rug. But I think like what best is like those emotions are never just swept under the rug. Like they're going to find a way to bubble to the surface and come out. So to be open with you, my husband and I experienced a miscarriage a few months ago, and sorry, it's hard to even like say the word still. But I went through basically a mini postpartum after the miscarriage, because your hormones build up so much when you're pregnant. So we were pregnant for 9 weeks, and then all of a sudden your body like drops back down. So I've done enough with women's health and hormones to understand that my renewed feelings of overwhelm and anxiety were definitely being triggered with the drop of hormone levels. But that still doesn't make it any easier. It still doesn't make any of those fear-based thoughts easier. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to connect with people. And I was reading on your blog of how like, what do you do when something happens, or even like postpartum after you have your baby and everyone around you is kind of going on with life as normal, and you're like, life isn't normal right now. Like clearly you've just gone through a very traumatic experience. Do you find that women, I guess either before or during working with you, end up talking more about their miscarriage or their postpartum depression or their anxiety? I'm just trying to, because I know that talking helps so much, and just sharing and leaning on people who know, love, and support you. Do you notice like, what is that journey that they go on as they're trying to like navigate the anxiety and depressed thoughts?
Part of it is, and I'm really sorry you went through that. And I know firsthand that feeling. The second time I was pregnant, all my friends were pregnant. So I thought, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And we're all going to have these babies together. And then I had another miscarriage, and they all went on. And it was like, I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to hear you talk about it. And it sounds weird to somebody who's never walked that journey, but it was like, I cannot manage this emotionally, and I just need some space. And everyone manages this all different. So I think that is one thing to let women know, is that your course for healing and moving through this grief, because you are moving through grief, is going to be different than how I did it or somebody else does it. And so people will give us solutions, and they'll say, when I went through this is what I did, and this was helpful. That's great. It's great feedback, but it might not work for me. And, some people would say like, keep yourself really busy. But for me, I didn't want to do anything, let alone like keep myself busy. So, with the women that I work with, we target two things. We target our thoughts in the thought process, because a lot of our thoughts can become negative or catastrophic. And what I mean by that is we'll think like worst case scenarios moving forward. It's never going to happen for me. Like, why me? What did I do wrong? And I remember personally navigating so many thoughts.
It's overwhelming. Like it's just
It
all
is.
of a sudden right there. And you're like, oh, okay. Like this is
Mhm.
clearly bubbling to the surface. Like, how am I going to deal?
Mhm.
But sometimes you just got to like cry those tears and like you're saying, find what works for you, even though people are giving you different advice.
Mhm.
Probably
Because we
this.
know ourselves a little bit better than, I mean, obviously I hope a lot better
Yeah.
than other people know us, but we really, it's like a twofold thing with anything that we're navigating. We have to focus on the quality of our thoughts and challenge the negative thinking patterns that we're having, because they can be very like a bully almost, that can bully us, or it can present us like fear-based ideas. And then we focus on our body and calming ourselves down physiologically. And I love using relaxation techniques. I love using grounding techniques that bring us back to the moment and say, okay, body, we're safe.
Yeah.
So it's just really about focusing on the quality of our thoughts and focusing on how we regulate our body, because anxiety and depression, they can take us all over and we are not mindful and we are not present. So those are the things that I really focus on with the moms that I'm working with.
Yeah. Cause that anxiety is real. Like I'm not usually a very anxious person. Like I'm usually like pretty calm, cool, and collected. But I could just definitely tell the wave and like the anxious thoughts that came up. I was like, this is not me at all. Like this is clearly something else I need to work through and get through, but I also need to honor these feelings. I'm curious too, in your experience of working with other like healthcare professionals. So we had to meet with like multiple doctors because like you're going through a lot of different appointments. You have to do a lot of checkups and just making sure everything is, you're okay. And I could tell the one doctor out of everybody was the one doctor who had also experienced a miscarriage. And at one appointment, she leaned over and she like touched my knee and she's like, how are you doing? Like, how are you really doing? And I was like, she's the only one out of this entire situation that asked me that. And I was like, oh man, like just even having someone ask you that question, I feel like is so comforting. And it just lets you kind of break down the walls for a second to just feel the sadness and the disappointment. Which, and as I was going through it, and maybe, I don't know if you've had this too, but before you then had a child, did the miscarriage at all and kind of like being let down from that experience, did that help you with your postpartum journey?
You know, I feel like, I mean, it has helped, but it's also hindered. So I want to be so
Yeah,
clear.
be honest. Yeah, be honest.
For me personally, and I hesitate to say this, I think part of the process that made it really hard for me was that it created a lot of guilt. The guilt was, you fought so hard to have a baby and now here you are experiencing, all these feelings. And it made me feel like, am I not grateful? And that was something very hard to process and grapple with. So it's something that I talk about with my clients, and I also talk about myself because I'm a human and I'm human. I'm not immune to like feeling, is the power of and. So we can grieve and we can be grateful. We can, be joyful and also be going through a season of pain or whatever it is. So there are two emotional experiences can exist at the same time. So we have to kind of create space for two of those things. And for me, postpartum, I'm so grateful, and I've never wanted something so much in my life. And I'm struggling so much. And I don't want to tell anybody, because if I tell people, they're going to think I'm a monster. They're going to think that, and I heard this, and I remember like I had a comment from somebody that I love dearly say to me, do you not want him? And that I about lost my mind. The fact that, I can talk about these things without crying now. It's been a few years, but it was hard. It was really hard. So that kind of makes you just want to close up into your shell and not tell anybody anything.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, that comment would be enough for you to never talk about it and to then feel ashamed and guilt. And I love what you say about the and, because I really believe that we can't have the joy and the happiness and the excitement without the sadness, loss, disappointment. Like, it's a human experience. Like, we experience all of these emotions. No one goes through life with having a happy life all the time. Like,
right.
It's just not possible. So what do you then do when you're faced with the hard moments and the challenges? And I've just been so I like study women's hormones and how they regulate across our cycle. And it was just really interesting of what they were like during pregnancy, what it was like, afterwards. And in my mind, I just kept thinking like, okay, this is a trial run for when you're going to do the real thing, because once that baby's there, it's not all butterflies and rainbows. I don't think any new mom has ever been like, yeah, I'm great, I got this, I'm not tired. Like, there's just so many emotions of like lack of sleep, your hormones coming down, bonding with this child that you don't really know yet, and they're screaming all the time. Like, what do you do? So when you work with women, do you usually end up following them through their entire journey, or do they usually come to you at a very specific moment on that path?
Most women actually come to me postpartum.
Okay.
Because to think of it, this is what the reason why, unless it's fertility related, that's like, I get some women that are dealing with the losses and the grief of that journey. But women that are pregnant are often told it's just your hormones. And they don't know that is such a thing called perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And they do present throughout pregnancy. So they're kind of chalking it up to hormones, and they're thinking, after I have this baby and after my hormones kind of regulate, I'll be good. But they recognize that their symptoms are starting to get worse. And we see a spike or like a peak in mood changes for some women, 4 to 6 months postpartum. Mm-hmm. Some women don't even recognize that they're even having this experience until it's like 9 months postpartum. So it's really just different on when they've captured it, how long they're willing to kind of persevere, because we're resilient, we're strong-willed, and we will just, I'm going to figure this out, or whatever we tell ourselves. So it's just different for every single person. But yeah, I typically see women postpartum, and sometimes it's beyond that first year, because most of us, myself included, may not recognize that there's a problem until it's kind of in the past. And we reflect and we think, man, I was really depressed back then and I didn't even know that. Or I was really stressed out about whatever it was. And you don't really recognize it until you've moved through it. So the awareness piece, the support piece, there's just so many that what leads moms to my office, or women to my office in general. Yeah.
I've heard that before, where doctors will ask women after they've had a baby, basically they're monitoring postpartum, but it's only within like the first 6 weeks. And then after that, they don't always ask about it. But I've heard that like a lot of the symptoms don't usually come forward until like 4 to 6 months later. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that?
You only have, most women have like one post-delivery, one postpartum visit. And this is part of the problem that we're trying to fix as providers, is that women are getting more frequent checkups. I mean, when we go to the pediatrician, and pediatricians are actually starting to really step up and try to screen moms as well, because they're seeing moms, they're seeing babies. So they're going to be, seeing moms as well. So we need to be checking moms more often. I only had one postpartum visit from my provider. I was given a screening measure on a clipboard, and you just circle the responses, and no one really follows up about that. And it's so important that providers are trained. So this is what, like, increased training, having mental health professionals working collaboratively with these providers, having pediatricians, OBGYNs, lactation consultants, doulas, everybody.
Yeah, it takes a whole team.
It does, because it's like you've got to be really skilled and knowledgeable about the symptoms. You've got to be asking the right questions. And if we're not asking the right questions, we're going to miss it. And some moms are not going to come into an office and get a clipboard of questionnaire and say, yes, I am feeling all these things. Some of them might feel embarrassed and not want to talk about it. But if a human being sits down and says, like what you just asked, like, how are you?
Yeah.
That
waterworks.
World of it. Yeah. Me too, right? Instantly.
I was like, you just opened the floodgate, like literally just asking me how I'm doing. I'm like, I don't have my shit together right now. It's okay.
Exactly.
But yeah,
sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah, something as simple as that. And then, what I noticed too was it helps when women share their stories with you. I think it makes us feel like we're not alone. Mm-hmm. So when my doctor, she was like, look, my first pregnancy ended in miscarriage and now I have 2 boys. And I was like, I hope she knows how much I needed to hear that right now, because like you need hope, you need light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. Like all of our paths are going to be different. So I know you work a lot with women on like guilt and shame. Like, how do you help them work through those emotions, depending on where they are in their journey?
Guilt and shame are not necessarily bad. It just depends on how we're using them. So like, obviously, if we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing, and I mean, you fill in the blank with what that is for you. I'm not going to define that for people, but we do feel a little bit of, not so good feelings, undesirable feelings is how I call it. So, however, in motherhood, particularly, we feel like mom guilt for things that we shouldn't be feeling guilty about, like taking time for ourselves. And that's, if we say that out loud, or if somebody else says that to us, we can just be like, what do you mean? That's not fair that you don't ever get a break. So the guilt comes up about something that we shouldn't even experience because it's not true. It's not like we did something wrong. It's not like we told a lie or we hurt somebody or went out of our way to harm somebody. And guilt is really, in motherhood, what I found is that it's with everything. I feel guilty about everything. I mean, that's truly what I hear. Every single one of my sessions is about moms feeling guilty about taking a break, working out, having their kids watch some kind of technology, and like spending time with their partner, leaving the house, working at their career, their job, whatever it is. They feel guilty about just about everything. And when we talk about these feelings, we talk about how they can be productive, because if we are kind of out of line or out of step, they tell us, okay, we need to be doing whatever, fill in the blank. But I always tell moms that if you could talk to yourself like you were a good friend, what would you say? Because my guess is that as moms, we're not talking to our friends this way. You're not saying to your friend, God, I cannot believe you sat down and had a hot meal. Like that, it's just, it sounds crazy.
How dare you have a date night with your husband?
Right.
Like, of course not.
And we wouldn't talk to our kids this way. We wouldn't talk to our friends this way. So the idea is to have a bit more self-compassion. And we work through self-compassion. And if you haven't heard of the book Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff, go buy it. It's an incredible book. It talks about how we can be kinder to ourselves and how we should stop being so judgmental, and that we should talk to ourselves like we talk to those that we love dearly. And that's the whole idea of combating these feelings of mom guilt or shame, because we need to start treating ourselves like somebody that we love and respect. And that's kind of how we get to the other side of this. But it's truly like challenging some of those thoughts, like, okay, how is this something to really be beating myself up about?
Right. Because don't you think like taking time to work out, taking time to be with your partner and away from your child makes you a better mom? Because
absolutely.
Absolutely. My sister, her son is now almost 7. Mm-hmm. And when he was 2, she went back to work probably, let's say 4 to 5 months after she had him. So for like a year and a half, she's like, I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. I just want to be with him. I'm feeling so guilty because I'm not with him. Her and her husband worked it out. She finally stays home and she's with her son full time. Within 3 months, she's like, I cannot do this. Like, I literally cannot do this. I have to go back to work. And she's like, I love my son, but I'm a better mom when we have some time apart. And I was like, I think that's a really great realization. Some women will want to stay home with their children, and it's absolutely okay. But for the women who want to work and take space, like, that's okay too. Like, there's no right way to do it. But the guilt and the shame that women carry around it, you then can't enjoy either scenario. Because then when you're with your kid, you're thinking of all the things that you're supposed to be doing. But then when you're away from them, all you're thinking about is how much you want to be with your children. And like, you can just see the mental mind game, basically, of going back and forth and never truly being content or happy in the space you're in.
Absolutely.
Do you end up working with a lot of like working moms?
I do. I work with both working moms and stay-at-home moms. And it's interesting because they both feel guilt. They both have shame. And to clarify, because I think these kind of get used interchangeably, like guilt is the difference between guilt and shame is that shame is how we feel about ourselves, how we relate to ourselves. I feel this shame is I feel bad about being, and guilt is I feel bad about doing. So it's about how we relate to other people. So it's like I wronged somebody is guilt. Shame is I feel bad about who I am. And to feel bad about who I am because I, like, for example, let my child watch a cartoon, that's a big feeling that does not, it's kind of like, the crime doesn't meet the whatever the slogan, that commentary is, the crime doesn't meet the punishment doesn't meet the crime. But that's what it is. It's like, they're out of line and they're out of sync. And if I feel guilty about doing, or about what I'm doing in relation to somebody else, like my child or my spouse or my partner, for what? For working outside of my home and making a wage,
right?
Or like recognizing like, this is what I need to do to be a better mom. And I find, particularly with like moms that are working versus moms that are not working, or moms that have done both, a lot of those feelings come when we compare, or it's like this comparison trap of, I am enjoying myself working, but I feel like a monster because because all of these other stay-at-home moms are telling me or showing me that they are enjoying it, so I should be enjoying it. Or maybe I am a stay-at-home mom and I feel guilty because I should be making money outside of the home and being career driven. It's like there's no winning when we compare that way. So part of it is recognizing like who we are as people, what we need, and what works for our family. And that's why comparison does not work.
Well, and it brings out the dark side of social media when you have people, you probably follow both ends of the spectrum. It's like you also have to take it for a grain of salt of what they're sharing, because that's our best life laid out in, picture form. But I can totally see a lot of shame around stay-at-home moms, because they might feel a lot of guilt on, or maybe words from other people, like they don't get to complain because they are not working, basically, where it's like, obviously they're working all day, or they feel like they can't ask for help in certain situations because all they're doing is watching their children, as if it's not a job, as if like the mom doesn't need a break. So I'm just curious of like that mentality too, of like trying to work that system of like staying home with your children, but then also setting boundaries on you time. And it's okay to like go out with your friends or have your mom watch your kid for a bit. Do you notice a lot of that struggle?
I see both ends. And the one thing that working moms tell me is that they don't, it's like the guilt never stops. Working moms have guilt about, I can't leave my children when I'm home because I've been home for work this whole entire time. So it's like, and then stay-at-home moms might feel like maybe the financial burden, or my partner was working. And so then he or she does not want to come back to, taking care of our child because, they've been working all day. So it's really and truly a mind game of, I don't deserve. And that's kind of like the statement. It's like, I don't deserve. And if we framed it that way, like, I don't deserve to take care of myself. I don't deserve to eat a hot meal. I don't deserve to take a few minutes to do whatever it is. It sounds crazy, but moms, whether you work outside of the home or inside of the home or both, and you work part-time or you're working from home, whatever you're doing, every mom deserves to take the time. And it's going to be about setting the boundaries, and it's going to feel uncomfortable at first doing it. I relate to this because I felt so uncomfortable doing things for myself at first. And then you do it, and then it still feels uncomfortable, and it feels like you're just kind of like walking through it and doing it. And then all of a sudden you're like, I feel good. And I'm a better mom because of it. Like, I am not going to be snapping today. I am going to be so joyful.
Right. Because like, I feel like everybody needs that space. Like even with, my husband is like, man, I really love when we spend time apart. Like it actually makes our relationship so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really helpful to have these conversations too, whether women have children or have been thinking about it or somewhere along that journey of thinking out, like, what do they truly want? What boundaries do they need? And practice like articulating and like taking those little baby steps.
Mm-hmm. I really encourage couples to have these conversations even before they become pregnant, and talking about are we going to both work? Who's going to take care of our kid? And what, all of these things. Who's going to be waking up for these feedings? Are we both going to be doing that? What's our value system that we want to pass on to our child? What about money? How are our finances going to change? How are we going to make up for that? Everything, anything that you can think of, ask parents out there, what are some of the things that changed? How are we delegating tasks and responsibilities? Am I going to be the only one that's going to be doing all of this? Are we going to share this responsibility? And then keep talking about it. Don't stop talking about it all. And then the more dialogue that you have, the more that you're talking about, hey, I really need your help, the better we all are. Because if we don't, then I just posted today about resentment in couples. Mm-hmm. And it's common because couples are not talking about their needs. And we need to always be talking about the stuff.
Yeah. I completely agree, because I feel like if you don't, then you're in the heat of the moment and you're like, why am I like screaming at my partner? And it's like, oh, I have so much pent up anger because I haven't talked about it.
Yeah.
How did you and your husband navigate? Because do you work at home and do you have like a physical practice that you go to?
I used to work at an outside, like a brick and mortar practice. And then I've transitioned to a virtual practice, but I still work for a research company. I'm not working for them right now, but yes,
Because I think that that's like another avenue, because like a lot more women are either working from home, or what does that look like? So when I used to work in professional fundraising, like at an office, and as I was trying to create Balanced Bombshells, I like talked to he was my then, we weren't engaged yet, so boyfriend. And I told him, I was like, how do you feel about me starting a business and working from home, like when we have a family? And in his mind, and I really encourage women to like have a conversation with your person, because in his mind, he just thought, Laura's working from home, she's watching the kids at the same time. And I was like, oh no. Like,
oh my gosh,
do you
no.
think that that's possible, to literally try and like have a full-time job and watch your kids from home at the same time? So I was like, I think this is a great time to have this learning exercise of what's actually doable. So it was just amazing. Like that was his initial thought. Like, oh yeah, she'll just be home.
It's
Oh,
impossible. Oh my goodness. Is that impossible?
right. And he just clearly had never thought about it. And of course, once he thinks about it, he's like, oh, like you're right. Once you put him in that
Yes.
situation.
Oh, my husband now knows, because he works from home as well. So he's seen me with our son, and he's like, if I didn't see you at home with him on the days that you're home with him, I would think, and he said this, I didn't say this. He would said, I would think that, stay at home moms, I mean, what do they do all day? And that was his
Right.
words. And he's like, until I saw what you did and I heard what you did all day long. And he's like, I commend every mom that stays home, because it's whatever you're doing is hard work. And I feel like that's just, we need to accept it for what it is. It's like every person, if we're giving it our all, we're doing what we have to do. We're doing what we want to do. You're doing something important, and that's all that matters. We don't need to compare them. But I think that those conversations are important, and also keeping in mind that you can change your mind.
Yeah.
And you can't, with whatever it is in the journey, it's a never ending journey, motherhood. I thought so many things even before, because I worked for one of the largest healthcare systems in the Southwest. I was like a type A high achieving person. And so here I am, like trying to climb the ladder, and I'm like, I'm going to take on some more leadership opportunities. And, I was like taking on more projects, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go. I had my maternity leave scheduled. It's funny how this all works out. Thursday was my last day of work. I had my son on Saturday. I had taken a week off to like prep, and
oh, he's coming.
Different plans.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to return on this date, and then I'm going to get right back to this project. And I just felt like this is not, and I went back to work. I did not have the same drive. And it's probably kind of like what you explained to your sister. I was just like, I don't feel the same passion about this. I don't want to do this. And this is not giving me joy. And all I think about is being home. And I was just, doing this every day. And I think my husband, as a husband of a psychologist, saw me and said, why are you doing this to yourself? And I thought, what are you talking about? He's like, why?
I'm like crying just thinking of that supportive conversation. Like, that's so nice.
It was,
you're just like,
I was a mess. I was a mess. I was just like, what do you mean? And he's like, I see you, you're miserable. You want to be here with him. And like, why are you going back? Your mental health is more important. And I'm like, I was just sobbing. I remember this day. Like
talking about finding the most perfect person for you. I think women should have more of those conversations too, of when their husbands are not calling them out, but really looking out for them and just being like, I see you. Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah. And he was like, dude, quit your dude. Cause I'm from Michigan. Yeah. And I feel like that's what everyone says. So I don't know.
I'm from Massachusetts. They do the same thing.
Okay. And he was like, quit your job. And it was like, I can do that. Not like I need your permission, but it was like, we can do that. I can do that. You're right. I can. And it was like, I was a mess and I couldn't believe it, but I was like, yes, I'm going to do that. And I put in my notice, and I felt like I was the most scared person, because I was going to quit my job. It was just a career I had been in for so many years, and I said goodbye to it. and I didn't like step away, but I got to do things that make me feel good. And now I have like my own baby, which is my business that I've created. And it's exactly what I want to be doing on my terms. So having that and knowing that you can change your mind and you can change your plan and you can change your decisions on anything really is a good thing to remember.
Yeah. Cause I know like the brain is rewired while you're pregnant to basically prepare for watching over a big child. So I'm not surprised that your motivation and your priorities post baby would change because your brain has seriously rewired. Like that's all you're thinking about is your family unit. How can I best support my family unit? And it's way less about having more responsibilities at work or overseeing more people where you're like, what is that going to, I mean, some women absolutely can still want that for sure. Mm-hmm. But I love that you made the right decision for you and that your husband recognized, hey, how long before he like recognized that you were struggling when you went back to work?
Oh my gosh, he probably knew the day. I went back to work 4 months postpartum. I took an extra month and I thought that was going to be fine. And my son hated sleeping. So
You're going to work like without sleep.
He was extremely colicky.
Yeah.
And he would scream, cry for hours on end. So it was just
I was that kid unless my mom was holding me.
That was my
I cried for the first 9 months and my mom was like, you were the roughest baby.
Are you the baby of your family?
Middle.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. See, I'm hoping to be like your mom. See, people are like, are you going to have another? I'm like, I hope to one day, but
my sister and brother were not like that. I was the only one that basically couldn't go to anybody else but her. But she's like, but after that 9-month mark, she's like, you turned out to be the best one. So I was like the most well-behaved, calm child. So she's like, I'll take 9 months of roughness for a lifetime of happiness.
Yeah. That's exactly, if you have a colicky child, I also can attest to that. My son is like the light of my life. He is the coolest kid on the face of the planet because he's mine. Yeah. But yes, amazing after that. So but going back to work in the midst of that, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, it's good to have a break from a screaming child, but I'm tired. And the last thing I want to do is be paying attention.
Yeah. And like focus on your meeting.
I want to go and hide. I don't want to go and work somewhere, So it was a big struggle, but definitely know that you can change your mind. And that is something that motherhood has taught me. I can change my mind. I don't need anybody to tell me why I can. That's something I've also learned. And I don't need like the permission of other people. Like I don't need society to tell me I should do this or I shouldn't do that. Like I can make these decisions on my own.
Yeah. Which I think is super empowering, but then it also boosts your mental health too, because I feel like a lot of the times without even realizing it, we're looking for that permission slip because we either fear criticism or being judged, but then it's like the only one doing that is ourselves.
Yes.
Like I bet if you had asked your coworkers or your friends, they would have been like, whatever you want to do. And you're like, wait, what? Like, so we're just like in our mind. Yeah, I'm allowed to do that. It always brings me back to like when you're in school and you have to raise your hand to go to the bathroom. But we're not in school anymore. We can choose when we have to go to the bathroom.
Right.
Like absolutely. We can get up and ourselves. And it's the same with your life. Like, this isn't what I want. I went back, I tried it out. It's not working. How do you then deal with the new shifts that are going on in your life? So
yeah, it's a wild ride.
Yeah. But I'm just so glad that there's women like you too, who are recognizing a need that is such a big hole in the community of women and helping being that voice so that they know it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to change our minds. It's okay for it to be really messy. Like it's okay. So I know you have a free guide for everybody about self-compassion and motherhood. So I don't know if you want to take a minute to talk about that.
Yeah. So I already kind of talked a little bit about it. So Dr. Kristen Neff talks about self-compassion, and the freebie that I created, it was based on her work, and it's to rate how self-compassionate we are, because I think we all need to be paying attention to that. We are typically, what I'm finding with the moms that I work with, are self-critical. We are our own worst critic, our own worst enemy. We're putting ourselves down. And the guide really is incredible in describing what self-compassion is, how we implement it, rating how self-compassionate we are, and then doing some exercises. There's an actual exercise in the worksheet on how we can increase our self-compassion. So it's based on the work of Dr. Kristen Neff. I highly recommend it, but it's really helpful. It's something that we all need to work on. that we need to be more self-compassionate. We want our kids to be self-compassionate. That's why I always like, I think to myself, it's like, I want my son to love himself. I want him to like embrace every part of himself. And then I cannot be the person walking around that's tearing myself down. And I think that goes for everybody walking the face of the planet, is being more self-compassionate. It can change the world. And I hate to sound that cheeseball-y, but it's true.
And can that self-compassion guide be used for women like before, during, and after pregnancy? Like it doesn't matter where they are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It can be used for anybody, really.
Yeah. We all need more self-compassion. So thank you so much for sharing that resource with us and the book. I'll be linking it in the show notes so women can grab that.
Absolutely.
Also sharing your website and social media channels as well, because you provide such a amazing resource of information.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
But thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me.